Good evening and welcome. I'm Jeff Williams with WSIU Public Broadcasting. I'm glad that you're all here this evening with us.
Buenas noches, y el nombre es Jeff Williams de WSIU Broadcasting.
Over the next half hour or so, we will hear from our distinguished panel this evening.
Dentro de la próxima media hora vamos a estar escuchando acerca de los panelistas.
And then we will also have an opportunity to hear from you as well in a question and answer session that will wind up our program this evening.
Y como también vamos a tener la oportunidad de escuchar de ustedes sus preguntas y sus respuestas que tengan acerca de esta noche.
I'd like to take this opportunity to reintroduce you to our panel this evening.
Me gustaría tomar esta oportunidad para volver a reintroducir a las personas que están en este panel esta noche.
One of our panelists tonight is René Francisco Poitevin. He's coordinator of the Hispanic Latino Resource Center at SIU Carbondale. He's there on the end.
René Francisco. René Francisco, coordinador del Resources Latinoamericanos de la universidad.
Next to René is Jane Adams, professor emeritus of anthropology at SIUC and a local civic leader.
Le sigue Bridget Phillips, coordinador. Oh, Jane Adams, profesor de antropología de la universidad.
Next to Jane is Juana Duran, recent graduate of SIU Carbondale and a former migrant farm worker.
Juana Duran, que se ha recibido de la universidad y fue inmigrante.
And last but not least is Bridget Phillips, coordinator of the Illinois Migrant Council's Technology Learning Center.
Y ahora tenemos Bridget Phillips, coordinadora del el Consejo de Migrantes de Illinois, Centro de Tecnología.
So now to start it off, we'll open with the panel discussion. I think we'll start with Jane. We saw in the documentary what the migrant and farm workers and Latino workers went through in California in the 60s through the 80s.
Para empezar, lo que vimos en el documental de las personas que empezaron en el trabajo de las granjas y de inmigración en los 60 y 80.
How does that compare with what we experienced here in Southern Illinois in terms of the migrant Latino population and the farm workers movement that we experienced here in this region?
¿Cómo se compara ahora actualmente en el trabajo de los inmigrantes?
Bueno, until the late 1960s, hasta los 60, el término de los 60, almost all of the migrant workers here, and there were many, casi todos de los trabajadores migrantes were, y estaban muchos, were white from Missouri and from around Southern Illinois. Estaban blancos de aquí, de Missouri, Arkansas, esta región, or African Americans, mostly from Southern Illinois. O negros, casi todos de aquí en el sur de Illinois. But in during that period, the migrant stream, durante este periodo, tiempo, ¿cómo se dice? Correo migrante, the migrant stream.
El movimiento.
El movimiento de migrantes. Those people found work in the industries that were growing very rapidly. Estos blancos y negros found work.
Let me recap that. Ella dice que inicialmente la gente que era blanca de los Estados Unidos que estaban trabajando, blancos y negros, estaban trabajando en las cosechas, en el trabajo inmigratorio.
But they began finding work in factories and in other places.
Pero entonces empezaron a conseguir trabajo en otros lugares como industria y otras fábricas que estaban proveyendo trabajo para estas personas.
So migrant workers began coming into this area from Cherán, in Michoacán, and from Guanajuato primarily. El estado de Guanajuato, I think, the state of Guanajuato, more than the city. I had studied in Guanajuato earlier, but it was from the state of Guanajuato. So here, the growers, the orchards, we have tremendous number of orchards. I think probably most of you know that. And some small fruits, tomatoes, strawberries, asparagus, those kinds of things. But when Mexicans started coming in to work, all of this activity that had been happening in the Southwest, mainly in the Southwest, people were aware of it. Both people here who were involved in the civil rights movement, as I was in the anti-war movement, were very aware of this new movement that was happening with people from Mexico coming into Southern Illinois. Can you? That was
Okay.
a lot.
Las personas que estaban trabajando no se encontraban mexicanos, entonces empezaron a poner avisos en el periódico que se necesitaban inmigrantes para que trabajaran en los cultivos. Y como dice ella, la verdura, los tomates, los espárragos y todo eso, pero entonces teníamos los cultivos de fruta que necesitaban más trabajo, ¿quieres decir?
Sí, sí.
Sí. Y la inmigración empezó a llegar del suroeste de los Estados Unidos, a empezar a traer de los mexicanos a que trabajaran.
No, they were very conscious. There was a consciousness, a knowledge of the movement that was happening in the Southwest.
O conscientes del
Chicano
movimiento,
movement.
Conscientes del movimiento que estaba viniendo del suroeste de los Estados Unidos.
And the civil rights movement in the South.
Y del movimiento de las civil rights. Derechos civiles que estaba pasando en el sur.
Sí. So as I wasn't here during much of that period, I was in Mississippi and then I was in other parts of the country. But many of the people that I knew began to work with migrants who'd come into this area. And the growers who were struggling because their economy was also being undermined by mass markets, by California, by Arizona. And so they had built the migrant camp north of Cobden in the 50s and the 60s, I guess, to try to get and keep workers in their fields with help from the federal government who had funded it.
Michigan, no, what was the state that you were in?
I was in Mississippi in the civil rights movement.
Durante el tiempo de Mississippi. Y luego empezaron
But here in Southern Illinois, the growers who were struggling very hard because of competition from California and Arizona.
Empezaron iniciaron el campamento de Cobden para darle vivienda a los trabajadores que estaban viniendo.
Sí.
Para tener dónde alojarlos y que pudieran trabajar en las cosechas.
Sí, y también that big packing shed was a cooperative. It isn't a cooperative anymore. It was a cooperative by the growers to try to be able to compete with California, Washington State, and Arizona.
Anteriormente era una cooperativa donde estaban empacando todos los productos para poder competir con los otros estados que estaban produciendo en gran cantidades.
Yeah. So in the 70s, in the 60s and 70s, then the white and black workers were replaced by Mexican workers who were the best workers that the growers had ever had. Frankly, they were really, people, the growers I talked to just always talked about that they were the best workers they'd ever had.
Until now. Los mexicanos y los negros empezaron a reemplazar los trabajadores blancos que han sido los mejores, los inmigrantes han sido los mejores trabajadores que han tenido hasta ahora.
Sí. Yeah.
Sí. Y nadie lo niega.
Sí. Better than any in the past. So I think that gets us up then to, was there more that you would like me to talk about here? Or will I pass it on to other people?
Yeah, I think it helps us bridge from what was going on in California in the 60s through up until 1980, a little different experience here. René, how is what we saw in the documentary, how does that relate to local issues that we experience here in Southern Illinois?
Yes. Buenas noches, todo el mundo. Good evening. So I guess like for me, what I want to start is sort of kind of like, which is a reaction. I have watched this a couple of times already, but I always have the same reaction. It's just kind of a mixed. On the one hand, I get really excited. Wow, this is what happens. When people come together. But at the same time, it's almost like a sadness, like, oh my God, we're going to have still to fight this and fight, and how much we have to fight for still, all these decades after Cesar Chavez and all the, we still have, close to 40% of Latino students, drop out of SIU without finishing their BA, and farm workers still are being exploited, and so on and so forth. So,
Okay. René dice que él ha visto el documental un par de veces y siempre le trae unas emociones diferentes. You tell me if I'm telling you wrong. A veces con algo de tristeza por lo que ha pasado y ahora pues se compara que en SIU todavía tenemos un 40% de dropout de muchachos que salen de la universidad.
So I guess like for me, the way I would like to sort of like frame my intervention here is I truly believe that we are at a crossroads in terms of what kind of nation we want to be, and that that there is a war going on, in terms of what does it mean to be American in the U.S. in the 21st century? Okay, and what I appreciate about this documentary, this particular episode, is that it's obviously a struggle that is not starting now, has been going on for a while, and it's a struggle that goes beyond the specificity of Latino issues, that also, crosses all sectors of society, about what does it mean to live in a world, in a society committed to inclusiveness and diversity. Yo lo puedo traducir también, si
Si tú quieres, mucho
Okay.
mejor.
So, pero el punto principal que quiero usar para comenzar mis comentarios es enfatizar que nosotros como sociedad estamos en una encrucijada, ¿no? Y yo creo que de verdad estamos en una encrucijada histórica y política donde lo que está en juego es nuestro concepto de lo que significa ser norteamericano en el siglo XXI. Y es una lucha que para mí es importante entender claro, que trasciende los issues latinos, ¿no? Que tiene que incluir luchas de otros grupos como los afroamericanos y las mujeres, todo eso. Y que el resultado de esta batalla política, cultural e ideológica va a determinar qué es lo que significa ser ciudadano y qué es lo que significa de nuevo ser parte de esta nación. So, voy a switch back to English. Just let me the part this and this one. So, and to be more specific, we're having this conversation at a time when political presidential candidates, are running platforms on explicitly anti-immigrant and anti-Latino proposals. Okay, we are having this conversation at a time when authors are becoming bestseller authors by explicitly writing anti-Latino books and getting rich out of this traffic of anti-immigrant sentiment. And to me, it's in a way makes more relevant the connection between what happened before, what is happening now, and which way we are going to go collectively. So, y para mí específicamente, lo que es importante entender es que estamos teniendo esta conversación en un momento histórico, ¿no? Donde candidatos a la presidencia están corriendo sus plataformas políticas explícitamente usando plataformas antilatinos y antiinmigrantes, ¿no? Y tenemos esta conversación en un momento histórico donde autores y escritores están haciendo bestsellers por publicar libros que son explícitamente antiinmigrantes. Entonces, ese es el contexto, ¿no? Que trae la relevancia de esta conversación, no solamente de dónde vinimos y en dónde estamos, sino hacia dónde nos dirigimos entonces como sociedad. Y voy a parar por ahora para darle oportunidad. So I'm going to stop now, just kidding, but thank you.
I wanted to follow up on one thing that you had mentioned. You'd mentioned the farm worker exploitation that still takes place. How would you characterize that exploitation today compared with what we saw in the documentary of 40 or 50 years ago?
There are, so I would say that there have been some changes. Okay, for example, there is explicit legislation on paper, And I think that there are examples where you could say, okay, this is better than when Cesar Chavez was like, getting arrested, okay? But we also have a situation where, for example, for example, you look at a place like California, where agribusiness is like the second largest economic sector in the state, okay, after the military. And they are still arguing that they cannot afford porta potties for the farm workers because they cannot afford to have bathrooms for the workers that work like in the fields, like, things like that. We also live in a context where, still hundreds of thousands of undocumented migrants are still being deported. So there is like on the one hand, you could argue, well, in terms of legislation, the things are better, but like in terms of government repression and the anti-Latino sentiment, things are worse. And I think that we still have a long way to go. They are still getting underpaid. Voy a traducir. Let me just, can I say this like quickly in Spanish? So, por un lado, ¿no? Entonces, yo creo que es razonable decir que hay unas cosas que han mejorado, ¿no? Desde los tiempos de Chávez, ¿no? El derecho a la huelga, derecho a organizarse laboralmente, y hay leyes en los libros que garantizan ciertas protecciones. Pero cuando lo ponen en el conjunto de que, por otra parte, la represión del gobierno es tan fuerte, ¿no? Vivimos más fuerte que cuando estaba Chávez, ¿no? Cada año deportan a cientos de miles de trabajadores indocumentados, ¿no? Y esa violencia de cada día, pues, para mí demuestra que todavía queda mucho por hacer. So.
Another topic that talked about in the documentary focused also on education and the opportunity for education. How would you assess or characterize the experience of Latinos within the public schools and how it's evolved?
Well, I can start. Okay. Entonces yo nomás voy a hablar en un idioma, no puedo hablar y pensar en un idioma y otro la misma vez. Bueno, ahorita que estamos hablando sobre César Chávez y Dolores Huerta y el movimiento chicano, me recuerdo mucho sobre los derechos civiles con Rosa Parks y Martin Luther King, ¿verdad? Todo esto nos enseñaron en la escuela. Y yo creo que eso es muy importante y debe ser parte de las escuelas porque es parte de nuestra historia americana también, especialmente si tienen varios latinos, ¿verdad? En la comunidad. Well, I'm watching this documentary and learning about Cesar Chavez, the Chicano movement, and Dolores Huerta. It reminded me a lot of the civil rights with Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, the boycotts and the strikes that happened. And I feel like this is... Okay. And I feel like this needs to be a part of our American history. As well, especially if there's a large Latino population. And to be honest, I heard of Cesar Chavez, but I never really looked into it just because at the time I didn't have resources, or Dolores Huerta, I just randomly started coming across. And I just find it a little bit sad that this wasn't taught in the general curriculum. And now that I've been to several different local schools, I've seen an increase in, I guess, world history. It's becoming a little bit more open in that aspect, but I still feel like this is a very important part for Latino students.
I just got notice that we're going to go into the Q&A, but I do want to say that I see a lot of first-generation Latinos wanting to go to college. I see a lot of students thinking about what they want to do after high school. And I see, and I talk to many counselors who want resources and want to find out more in how to guide this population. And I get phone calls from, luckily, great Carbondale School to reach out to me, and undocumented students asking what their rights are and asking what kind of direction they have in this future. And so I see a population of people who are paying taxes, and they're being given the permission to pay taxes, but they're not being given the permission to work. And with that contradiction comes discrimination and inequality. And so there's so much to say, but given the notice of a Q&A, I'm a little bit frazzled at the moment, but I just wanted to give that message out there, that there is a population that's in need of direction.
Just to follow, and we'll move into the Q&A right now, but just to follow up on that, what do you see as the most needed resource enable you to help and advance those education needs?
To enable myself or enable the students? Oh, okay. Access, I think, knowing where to find that information, and having the courage to ask, and knowing that they have that comfortable, safe environment to say, I don't have documentation, or I'm not sure what to do with my future, can you guide me? So having a safe space and then being pointed in the direction of those resources. Lo que dije es, hay una generación de niños, estudiantes, que quieren continuar su educación, y que a veces las escuelas no saben cómo manejar, no saben las respuestas, y sí, a veces, perdón, es difícil. También lo que dije, que hay personas en este país que tienen el permiso de pagar impuestos, pero no tienen el permiso de trabajar. Y con esa contradicción viene desigualdad y discriminación. Y sus niños no tienen opciones, no tienen las mismas opciones. Entonces, cuando es tiempo para aplicar para colegio, necesitan recursos y necesitan ambiente. Medio ambiente, que es cómodo y que hay gente que pueden ayudar y apoyar a los niños en una dirección.
Yes.
Of the need of the children of migrant workers or Mexicans or undocumented immigrants, the need for them to be educated is very important. Now, it is interesting to look at and listen to people like us that are very educated, because we already are educated, to sense that and say the kid cannot come to us and ask us what are the resources. I mean, this is a country where education it's mandatory to every child that is living here, independently of where they came from or what their origins are. And so it is interesting to say that the child has to come to us to ask for the resources, whereas the school should be anticipating that. If a child comes to the school and the child is from Poland, and then the teacher, even though the teacher does not speak Polish or does not know anything about the Polish culture, should be able to say, okay, this child is in kindergarten and his mother or father do not speak any English, but we're gonna enable them to have empower them to have the resources that they will need. If the child grew up here, comes, is in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, fourth grade, and the parents never know what they are going to be needing to go to high school. My experience personally was that I did not, and I am an educated person that has finished college, and I have a doctorate. So when I have my child was in elementary school. We had there was a lot of influence to have him study and everything, but we really didn't realize that everything that he did in the last 3 or 4 years of their junior high school, for example, was going to count for him to be able to access the high honors or the courses that will enable him to go to college. So as a parent of a child, educated parent, I was not aware of that. And so can you imagine a person that does not speak any English and is working from dawn to dusk all day long and has very limited resources in their home themselves because there is maybe no light or no television or anything like that. So if we say that the child has to come and and he's not going to feel good about asking what resources he needs, it's just a little bit like saying, okay, yeah, it's okay. I cannot help you, and I'll go to my home tonight and forget about you. The child, the teachers, the principal, the superintendent should be making resources available to that child and to the parent to be able to say, okay, yeah, I know. My child may not want to go to college, and that is right. By the way, we're talking about going to college, but is everybody going to have to go to college? Are we going to have work for everybody that is a doctorate or a master's? No. The majority of people that are graduating from college, they don't end up going to work in the same area that they studied. So saying, okay, you're going to go to college is not really a real reality thing. So that child needs to learn that it will be okay to be maybe working, cleaning this library, but he will be cleaning it very well. Somebody taught him how to do it in a way that empowers him to earn a good salary. And then there will be another one that he wants to go to college and he will know how to do it. And 2 years ago, there were 2 children, Hispanic children, that were not going to graduate because they didn't have enough credits in the high school to be able to graduate from high school. Is that possible? I mean, should we be seeing that? So I'm sorry, I talked too much.
To follow on that trend, René, you'd mentioned the difficulty in getting Latino students to graduate from the university, from SIU. What is the big hurdle there? Is it resources or reaching out, or is it on the faculty reaching out?
Thank you. One of the most important things for academic success, and this is regardless of which group you belong to, okay, is the importance of having a sense of belonging. Okay, so, and this is not a Latino thing only, as I said, it's everybody. So, and so the main challenge, or I would say, like one of the failures, those institutions with high attrition rates, dropout rates, is the incapability of creating that environment where students can see themselves as being part of the institution. Okay, and actually, I love the word citizenship. Okay, citizenship, when you explain it, okay, so what is it? How can you say without not having to use a word? Like, the best description that I like is, that is used, that I think is accurate, is having a sense of belonging. To be a citizen of a country, I belong to this place. Okay, so I also think that it applies perfectly, for example, in the context of SIU. Okay, it's important that every student sees themselves as belonging to the academic institution, like that I have a right to good education. I have a right to own that education and speak up in terms of what I want to get out of this institution, like, and so on and so forth. And the university needs to do a better job at making that happen, specifically in the context of the Latino community. I can tell you, and we, for example, like we lack, at many levels, in terms of like at the most basic levels of like, having folks that speak Spanish in the admissions office, so that when the parents come in, someone can actually sit down with them and explain it, all the way to more Latino faculty. We are. It's interesting. We saw these intense fights. I have a right to know my own history, and where I come from, and that's so core to my identity, and like, so on and so forth. And we still have to fight that fight at the university level, like, in terms of like, so what kind of courses, like, we need more courses, we need more faculty. Fortunately for us, we have the ones that we have are very good, but this is the context of like, what will make someone leave and don't want to come back, so so that's what I think is important to keep in mind when we talk about, like, in terms of resources, like, so on and so forth.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I think a lot of it has to do with empowerment. And do students even believe that they can hold a position in which they're worth fighting for? So in response to, do we look for help? No, because a lot of us don't feel like that's our dream. A lot of us don't feel like that's us. Why? Because we don't see it in our staff. We don't see it in our teachers. We don't see it in anyone in power holding those places. So I feel like empowerment is key. It's something that needs to be talked about, and it's all about what you expect from your students. You expect them to perform well. You expect them to go to college. You expect them to take all the places of leadership, and they will. And then they'll know that this is theirs. They're looking for something. They're looking for wherever they're going to be successful, so they can ask questions. And it's what Bridget was talking about. Where do I fit in, and can I go ahead and throw myself out there? So I feel like from a future educator's perspective, it does have a lot to do with the structure of the school. Is the school prepared to embrace students with their culture, bring them up by their culture in a way that they are then prepared to bring their families along with? Because like you said, families are not prepared. First generation problem for all of us. So a lot of it has to do with the structure of the school and empowering the students, and there's just a lot in there, but empowering students is big. Empowering students that feel like they might not be able to, well, now you know you can. Find the one person that can help you, and we have a running list of everyone that looks at us because of the color of our skin. We are accessible to them, but we have like hundreds because there's not enough of us.
All right. We are just really scratched the surface of this. Is there anyone else? One more.
Another comment right here.
If one more comment here. Yeah.
Good evening. I'm Deborah Gates-Brookler from the Old School Community Center. I've worked with the international community and with Latinos for the past 15 years and pretty much have served close to 20,000. In the amount of time that I've been here, I'm just going to talk about something that actually happened yesterday. Maybe I wasn't there during the time that there was actually representation, but yesterday Senator Forby, Senator Bliss, and Senator Luchtenfeld were at SIU. And during the time that I was in the audience, thank you, there was no representation at all in the panels or the ones that were asking regarding Latinos or international needs. There was nobody the entire time that represented our community to our senators. I had to go up afterwards and talk with each one of them regarding that. So, that to me is huge discrimination because we have big issues that are needing to be represented and our needs need to be seen in the budget. And nothing was said from us. Now, the things that I have seen, not only in education, in Bridget and you guys, you have much more that you can say. You're presently working, but there's been human trafficking with interpretation. The majority of the clinics here with somebody who has limited English proficiency, the majority of them absolutely refuse to provide professional interpretation. Bring your own interpreter. And, you know, that is huge. There's life-threatening things that are going on. People that are going to surgeries and don't receive the education that they need. There's a lot of stuff still going on in Southern Illinois that we have seen that I could talk forever, but there's huge discrimination still that we need to address.
And we'll let you have the last word. Thank you very much on behalf of Carbondale Public Library, Illinois Humanities, and the Illinois Migrant Council's Technology Learning Center. Thank you for joining us and being with us and sharing with us tonight.